Al-Qassam brigades, they declared today that they rescued 2 Israeli prisoners of war from a tunnel that Israel attacked. This is not the first time that the Palestinian resistance saves Israeli prisoners of war. Just around a year ago, they said that one of them tried to commit suicide and they rescued him. Of course, dozens were killed. As a matter of fact, Israel confirms that over 43 were killed, but the Palestinian resistance still doesn't declare the full numbers. However, a very large number of them were killed because of Israeli strikes. There's been evidence to support that from the 7th of October, from those who were released, and from evidence on the ground as well. So in this video, they're showing an Israeli that they rescued from an Israeli bombing inside of the Gaza Strip. There were many reports recently by the Palestinian resistance that Israel carried out attacks against the prisoners of war again and again. Israel keeps repeatedly doing that. And this time they're saying this is not the only thing, that we have more details to follow. And usually they publish information depending on the developments on the ground. The Palestinian resistance doesn't always publish all of the information that they have at hand. They need to wait for the relevant time. They need to wait for the relevant day and sometimes hour to publish information, because Israel is still, of course, inside of the Gaza Strip, and Israel is still conducting attacks inside of the Gaza Strip. Which leads us to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. The Palestinian resistance is carrying out more and more attacks and ambushes inside of the Gaza Strip, but there's something different happening this time. And that thing is, well, Israel is actually publishing the information. Israel is publishing information about these attacks that are happening inside of the Gaza Strip. They're saying how many casualties they have. Of course, it needs to be taken with skepticism. At the end of the day, we don't expect Israel to publish the full picture. But in previous periods, and we've been talking about this for a year and a half now, the genocide in Gaza, when there were very large attacks coming from the Palestinian resistance, Israel did not report many of the attacks. They would say, oh, one was injured, one was this and that, but they did not outright say that we have this many casualties. No. Today they're talking, like this week, so far they confirmed 3 attacks, saying details, giving details, what's happening. Is there some sort of an intention? Is there some sort of a shift coming from the Israeli side, from the Israeli media in particular, to apply a bit more pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu? And now this media in general, much of it has been supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu. If we talk about online media or newspapers, some of the TV channels were critical, more critical. He had other channels that are totally aligned with him. But now they're outright declaring these attacks, but of course they're portraying it as if it's some sort of heroism and what have you. So this was one of the reports. Neta was a fearless warrior. Stories of the fallen. Navy SEAL Neta Yitzhak Kahana fell in a clash with fighters. They're calling them the T word. You and your whole forces are the T word. In Shaja'iyya, and about an hour later, Captain Ido Voloch was killed in a rescue battle. They're confirming these reports that are happening inside of the Gaza Strip, but the resistance actions against them. And not only that, Israeli Channel 12 had detailed information. That's even before the Palestinian resistance came up and clarified, by the way. So there's something happening here. Channel 12 said at 4:40, 20 minutes to 5 today, Israeli terror forces were having an ambush, preparing an ambush for the Palestinian resistance in a Shuja'iyya. Shuja'iyya is an area that Israel is invading now inside of the Gaza Strip. They were planning this ambush against the Palestinian resistance fighters. Why? Because to them, they had information, they had intelligence that the Palestinian resistance are coming to that area, only for them to find that what? the ambush is being prepared against them in that area. Channel 12 continued to say that as soon as the Palestinian resistance fighters arrived, there were battles for 2 hours. They started taking them one after the other. 2 hours of intense fighting. Rescue forces were finding it very difficult to come. 15 minutes later, a Hummer is exploded in the area. Officer killed, 5 wounded. Half an hour later, they target another Israeli tank. An officer was killed, according to Israeli Channel 12. That was in Shuja'iyya, only today. What did they say about the other actions? They said there was another activity coming out, another attack coming from the Palestinian resistance in Tel Sultan. That's near Philadelphia corridor. That's an area that Israel said, oh, it's a closed area and we're expanding it. And all the time you see on television and on the internet some maps of Israel expanding its presence. They were next to the Philadelphia corridor, fighting them. What happened? Israeli IDF terrorists went into a minefield. Al-Qassam fighters were waiting for them. Mines exploded. Dozens wounded and some critical. That's again according to Israel. And again, these areas have IDF presence in them for a very long time. As a matter of fact, Israel did not withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor even during the first phase of the recent ceasefire that happened. They were supposed to withdraw on day 50, whether or they go into phase 2. They did not withdraw at any point. So they did not have a situation like they had in the Netzarim corridor, where they withdrew partially to what's called as the parameter or the buffer zone, about 700 meters inside of the Gaza Strip. But the people were allowed to go back and forth, south to north and north to south. And then from the other axis, they were able to go with vehicles. Of course, Israel went back to some parts of the Netzarim corridor now, but they never left the Philadelphia corridor. And this ambush has been carried out against them in that area, close to the area that, by the way, the previous Hamas leader in Gaza was martyred in, fighting Israeli soldiers, fighting Israeli terrorists inside of Rafah. That means the Palestinian resistance is present everywhere, every single place, and Israel has no answer. I mean, the only thing that we're seeing now is, well, Israel at least is declaring or showing that they're trying to take some of the resistance fighters, but every time they try something, they are faced with ambushes that they couldn't even think of. 2 ambushes in the same location in the buffer zone in the north, as in next to the Israeli border, literally behind enemy lines. An ambush in central Gaza, more in Shuja'iyya, and now in Tel Sultan, every single location that they're present in. That shows you the level of chaos this country's in and this defeated army is in. 18 months of genocide. Let's put everything into perspective. There's a blockade on Gaza. Nothing has been going in for the past 50 days. People are starving, no medical, no nothing. These people are coming from under the ground and fighting Israel to this day, and very effective, very large operations, similar to the operations that we saw in the beginning of the genocide, in the beginning of the ground invasion of Israel into the Gaza Strip. That shows you a picture that is very, very far from what is being portrayed about Israeli control, about displacing the people, about all of that. At least when it comes to the resistance in Gaza, talking about disarming and not disarming. Now, in relation to the disarming, there was another statement today coming from Osama Hamdan, who is a senior figure in Hamas. He said, guys, we will not be giving up our weapons. There is no way. It's not even negotiable. We won't even talk about giving up the weapons. And he also said that we're continuing until liberation. We have weapons because we have occupied lands, people oppressing us, and we're going to have them, and we're going to continue up until the full liberation. So these people are not intending to stop so long as Israel is continuing its genocide inside of the Gaza Strip, which leads us to the internal trouble. Now, more and more people signing, problems with the Air Force. A couple of days ago, I spoke about the Israeli pilots now refusing to serve. They're being asked to conduct operations inside of the Gaza Strip. Every operation now has to be authorized by the commander to show that they're, very, keen on human life and human loss in Gaza. But still, despite that, some of the pilots are saying, I'm attacking a place. And then when I go and see the news, civilians are being killed and they're facing more and more trouble, apart from the actual signatories that they're getting with these petitions, growing petitions over 150,000. But now there are more calls for action on the ground, with a statement coming from the previous head of the Shin Bet, Ayalon, a black flag has been raised. Non-violent civil disobedience is our duty. He is outright calling for total disobedience without violence. A non-violent disobedience, that means shutting down the markets, refusing to go to work, shutting down essential industries inside of the country. This is in line with previous statements coming from the main business bodies inside of the state of Israel, and more calls to protest and more calls to take action against the country, not just coming from a man like Ayalon, but coming from political leaders too, some in the Israeli opposition. And by the way, Ayalon was the same man who previously said before that if he were a Palestinian, he would have fought Israel to protect his land and to liberate his land. This is an Israeli head of the Shin Bet. Like many statements their leaders had, if I were a Palestinian, I would have been fighting. I would have been in a Palestinian resistance group. Who is saying that? Israeli members of the Shin Bet, leaders, previous chief of the Shin Bet. This is showing you the level that the chaos is getting in internally inside of Israel. And people like Ayalon, they have their weight. They have their weight inside of the state of Israel. And it's not only him, by the way. The previous Israeli IDF chief of staff, Dan Halutz, he also participated in a protest. And he made some very interesting statements too. He said that, Benjamin Netanyahu is taking the country to oblivion, basically, is leading the country towards more and more chaos. And the Israelis, they need to continue. Benjamin Netanyahu, in his own words, he said, the guilty man, the convicted man, Benjamin Netanyahu, is an outright threat to the state of Israel. He is a clear, tangible, and immediate threat to the existence of the state of Israel. This is coming from the previous IDF chief of staff. He is fighting his own citizens and is allegedly collaborating with a terrorist state, according to him, Qatar. Every citizen must demand an answer to the question, is there treason within the Holy of Holies of the state of Israel? Him, alongside many other significant figures, and this is a previous chief of staff, Halutz, saying that the prime minister is a clear, immediate, and tangible threat to the state of Israel. And he's criticizing his conduct, of course, with leaks, the Qatar Gate, what they're calling in Israel, about people close to Benjamin Netanyahu dealing with Qatar and getting money from them, lobbying money through the United States. And that was an investigation that was being carried out by the current head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, who Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to sack. That's why he has it in for him, by the way, because he was carrying out this investigation, an investigation in the Israeli police that is under the authority of Itamar Ben-Gvir. That's why they want him out so bad. Which leads me to the following thing. Now, a Hamas delegation went to Cairo. Yesterday, I spoke about the fact that Israel is desperate for a ceasefire, but a ceasefire that suits it. Not a full-blown ceasefire. A ceasefire that will give them a bit of a break for them to continue their genocide. And I also gave you some statements coming from the leaders of Hamas, some senior figures in Hamas, saying that now it's all or nothing, either an all-out deal or nothing. We're not getting into phases again. That's it. Clearly, Israel they broke the initial temporary ceasefire, although it could have been extended. They broke the current ceasefire that was supposed to continue just after phase one, and carried out the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, over almost 2 months, nothing is going into Gaza. He said nothing, all or nothing. We need a full ceasefire. Now, a whole delegation of Hamas is in Cairo. Usually when the top figures of the delegation go to Cairo, that means there are advanced talks. That's not to say that a ceasefire is coming tomorrow or the day after, by the way, but I'm just telling you so you can understand. Usually in Doha, things begin with the delegation. When they come to Qatar, they try and communicate with the relevant figures inside of the Gaza Strip. And by the way, Israel has been killing those passing information for the negotiation inside of the Gaza Strip, by the way, communicating with Egypt. Why? Because they want to hinder everything. Netanyahu orders everyone who is known, or Israel knows that is communicating, to be killed. But they're still communicating somehow. And that's something that baffled Israel from a very long time ago, from the days before they targeted Yahya Sinwar. Now, if Hamas is in Egypt, that means there are advanced talks. The head of the Mossad was in Qatar yesterday. The head of the Mossad was in Qatar instead of Ron Dermer, the same man who was supposed to delay everything and play by the timeline of Benjamin Netanyahu. All of a sudden, the head of the Mossad was back, a man who showed some willingness and actually called to reach an agreement back from the beginning of 2024, is all of a sudden back in the picture, showing that things are moving, something is moving. And the talks are about a very long ceasefire, 5 to 7 years. I spoke about the proposal that came jointly by Egypt and Qatar a few days back, talking about potentially a 7-year ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. And now clearly they're talking about something that will lead us to a full ceasefire. How is that aligned with the tone from the United States? The United States is a very big player. As a matter of fact, without the United States, there will be no Israel. Without the support of the United States, Israel is gone, done. That's it. They're living on the survival. Israel is living on the support of the United States. Arms, finance, legitimacy, basically pissing, on international law and disregarding everything to do with international law and visiting the United States. What is happening with the United States? What is the tone coming from the United States now? Administration, I mean, of course, not the people, please, or nor the people in Britain or Europe or whatever. The sentiment is, of course, very different. The administration. Well, Donald Trump had a very interesting statement today. He had a conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, and during his flight, he was asked about Gaza. And all of a sudden, he's saying, we've got to be good to Gaza, Donald Trump. And I wanted to share the video with you, and then we will talk about it in a bit more detail.
Concerns about access to food, medicine coming into Gaza. When you spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu the other day, did that come up at all about access to humanitarian aid moving into Israel?
No, Gaza came up, and I said, we've got to be good to Gaza. Those people are suffering. We've got to be good to Gaza. We're going to take care of them. There's a very big need for medicine, food and medicine, and we're taking care of it.
In terms of like opening up more access points?
Pushing people very hard.
Pushing the Israelis?
We are.
To open up more access
Very
points?
hard to get food and medicine into Gaza.
How did the Prime Minister respond to that?
Well,
So in that statement, but of course, because if it wasn't clear for some of you, because it was in a flight, of course, he said we've got to be good for Gaza. There's a very big need for food, and we're taking care of it. We're taking care of it, and we need to support Gaza, and these people are suffering, and we're going to take care of them. Now, he was asked about how Netanyahu responded to his statement, and he said Netanyahu felt well about it. The American president, with all of the held statements that happened before, by the way, is all of a sudden telling reporters that we've got to be good to Gaza. What is that shift? What is happening? Okay, well, I'll tell you what's happening. So I've spoken a lot before about the fact that some of the statements that are being made by some of these leaders, including Trump, are there for a show. Part of a psychological warfare and an attempt to impose realities on the ground, in hope that the other side will submit and surrender, scaring people, trying to petrify them, and all hell will break loose, and as if they're going to nuke Gaza or whatever. But that's far from reality. And even with that, we're talking about, well, we're dealing with reports that are coming and trying to read through them, right? And usually what comes out is just the tip of the iceberg. That's very, very far from what happens behind the scenes. What happens behind the scenes is far more complicated, far bigger, far more complex, and in many cases will shock observers even in this world of politics. And many things can change. However, Donald Trump and the United States cannot give Israel an indefinite time to carry out this genocide in Gaza. It's impossible. Israel has very many reasons to stop and things restricting it from continuing. So does the United States. They, of course, try it and portray it as they can somehow continue forever. As a matter of fact, Benjamin Netanyahu, by continuing this more, stretching this war for more than a month or two, has gone against what Israel has done in its whole history, which is diving into a war of attrition, getting itself into a war of attrition. The whole philosophy of Israel was sharp, quick strikes behind enemy lines. Get the job done and get back. Don't put your internal state at any harm, any danger. Economy is fine. People are risk-free. We're not being attacked. Internal, nothing. This time, Benjamin Netanyahu went against all of that and insisted and was stubborn to a level to drag Israel into a war that it cannot handle. By its size, by the logistics, the people, the level of people willing to fight, all of that combined. So Benjamin Netanyahu's stubbornness and his self-engulfed interest and his psychopathic, narcissistic approach led to that situation. The United States, although it wants chaos, but a controlled chaos, not a chaos that is out of hand or chaos being led by a psychopathic individual like Netanyahu, who can do things that are not entirely aligned with the interest of the United States. And I'm saying the United States with the Israeli lobby pressure even. But Trump, clearly, he had internal problems. He had a line looking to negotiate with Hamas and looking to reach a deal, looking to de-escalate. Then pressure from the Zionist lobby was expelling these people, canceling certain appointments. Trump, before he was elected, he was talking about peace, and and everything is gonna be fine when I go in. He started to shift again, following pressure, heavy support from the Zionist lobby too, but clearly not all of them are aligned. The United States can't give Israel indefinite time to continue, and Israel's internal problems prevent it from continuing now with all of these attacks that they're confirming, even ambushes by the Palestinian resistance. Take that and tie it with the developments on the ground, because we need to contextualize to try and understand. It's very difficult without that. You'll be lost. He's saying that now Israel changed the head of the delegation to a person who accepted a ceasefire very long back rather than Dermer. The Hamas delegation are in Cairo, usually a location or a station that comes before an agreement because it's linked with Gaza. There would be approvals being taken by the core Hamas leadership inside of the Gaza Strip, and of course the military wing of Hamas and the resistance as a whole, the armed resistance in Gaza. Because these people, it's like these people negotiating outside, the people of Gaza will be making the decisions. This is very important for people to understand. From Gaza, they will be sending messages and they will decide, not just the people abroad. That's not to say that there are some sort of tensions or conflicts in the decision making, no. But those in Gaza, like they should, they need to have the say. The leadership of the resistance and the people who have been sacrificing all along. And they're not detached from the society. They are the society. The society extends to them. It's their families, it's their surroundings, it's their neighborhoods, it's their homes that are being targeted. And they are fighting the same entity that is conducting all of that. Tying all of this with the developments, with the facts that we're talking about a long ceasefire, Hamas saying no longer, no phases anymore. That's it. We're looking for only an all-out deal. This shows you that something is happening. No, not to be, of course, pessimistic or optimistic. Something is happening. And Donald Trump, we've known him to do 180s, many U-turns, typical again. But the timing of his statement is very important. 2 weeks ago, he was also changing his tone, saying that we're going to need to end this, right? Similar statements came from Witkoff too, but of course they wouldn't want to make it public so that the other side thinks that they're going to come to an agreement anyway. They want the Palestinian people, they want the leaders of the resistance, and they want the whole world to believe that we're going to do this forever up until you surrender, which isn't going to happen. It clearly isn't going to happen. The Palestinian resistance is not going to submit, and this will be ending. The question is when. Judging by the signs and by the developments that are happening now, and by the statement from Donald Trump, there are indications that it might happen at some point soon.